faith was not really always in the forefront. It was not always something that I thought about.
Right.
I didn't make it part of my everyday life, I guess, is what I mean. It was
but I think like so many of us that we, at a certain point of our life, are just showing up in the building, whether we're singing, whether we're reading, whether we're just there as participants. We're just going because it's the thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's what you do on Sunday. You pick your time. You might have your pew, whatever it might be. But you're there. You did the thing, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
You did it. And then you walked away and you're like, yeah, I did my thing. Hi, I'm Greg Wasinski, and welcome to another edition of the Faith in Real Life podcast. You have joined us for season 6. That is right. We're on our 6th season of podcasts, and I've been doing podcasts ever since they were called radio shows back in 2005. I'm a speaker, a husband. I'm a Catholic author. I'm a Christian presenter. I've done a little bit of everything in my life, even a former business executive for 12 years in different realms of the business sector. So I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway. Oh, no, that's a different song. But I've done a little bit of everything, and I like to take those experiences of what my faith journey has been, the ways that I've hit pitfalls, the mountaintop moments that I've been able to experience, and then we take them and we talk about them together. And I love to share people that also have those experiences to help you journey and become everything that God created you to be. I'm just grateful that you're here, and I know that God has amazing things in store, especially during this conversation that we kick off season 6 with. So without further ado, for the first time ever, in the, 2005 is the first time in the 19 years that I've been doing podcasts, since they used to call it radio, I am interviewing my wife, the one and only Aimee Wasinski. Aimee, thank you for joining us on the Faith in Real Life podcast.
happy to be here, Greg. So formal.
I know, it's kind of weird, actually.
It is.
This is like marriage counseling without a
Counselor,
a mediator.
Yeah.
So, no thanks. Okay, so here's the reason that I really wanted to do this. Number one, I don't know, everything that we're going to talk about, but I do know this, we have a journey that I think some people need to hear. We have some stories that we can share, and I think sometimes that when we talk about the imperfections that we've overcome and the ways that we've overcome them, help other people really identify and are able to then know that they're able to do these things in their own life. So I think that that's part of just talking about some of our experiences, and you've done amazing things when it comes to praying for me. So I think that in itself could be its own burden.
Well, thank you. I can't take all the credit for that, but I did in my own way pray for you on our journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all I could do some days.
So tell everybody, not everybody knows your story. Since I ask all my other guests, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and all those things. I'll let you do it rather than me doing it for you.
So my story, I would say, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and I was an only child. My mother was an only child, and so we had a really small family.
Small family.
Theater was a huge part of my life. I loved to sing, and I loved to act and dance, and got into it really early when I was 9 years old. I did my first professional production and loved it. And my mom probably got sick of playing the piano for me all the time. She was a music teacher. Yeah. So I would try to make her play music for me for hours to sing by. She would tell me okay, we got to go to bed.
Yeah, right.
Time to stop. But so I loved it. And I grew up doing shows in high school, and I went to college for musical theater at Baldwin Wallace. It was the college at the time, not a university. Now it's a university. And that's where we met.
I was going to say, tell me about the young man that you met in college.
Well, I met you I'm trying to think. I met you by accident at a theater meeting where you flung the door into me and hit my leg and
showered you with I'm
so sorry letters. And
yeah, and Aimee was going to be the one woman that I could prove to everybody that I could just be friends with a girl. And then here we are, 29 years of marriage later. It was bliss. And I'm glad that you like theater, because we met in the theater. We met through the theater. On my side, the very first show that I saw Aimee do was Pippin. And she walked out on stage and I was like, I am going to marry that girl. Like, who do you say that about? Like, I never saw anybody in my life and was like, yeah, I'm going to marry that girl. Like, yeah, like I'd like to go out with her. I'd like to do this. And I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. Like, and here I am 18 years old. Like when I'm saying this, man, it's just so weird to think about that, but God has a plan. Right? And you watch him move all of these pieces and you see him just from the time that we're born, right? He knows, like, I think about our marriage and I think about the work that we do, and it's done separately, have done together, are doing together. But I think about, so I feel that that's anointed by God. I feel like that's God's purpose, and he always had a plan for us to be together.
no matter how much we fought it.
Right.
Because in the beginning, I fought it. I was like,
I did not.
This is not. Well, I know
did
you
not.
did.
I caved very early.
I know, but I was not as sure as you were, and I was, very confused and did a lot of praying myself. And I kept saying, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right, but it does seem right all at the same time. Like, why do I keep wanting to gravitate towards this when it feels like I shouldn't be? But it seems like it's the right thing to do when it felt wrong all at the same time. It was so crazy. Yeah.
It was, you're in college. You don't, like, I never went there for that. I mean, I only went to school for 1 year at that time, because then I left to get married, right? And move into the business world. But I just think about how neat it is that God protected us, or, persuaded us, or pushed us, or gave us the courage, whatever it was. And that doesn't mean that the road's easy, right?
No,
it just
wasn't
means,
easy at all.
It just means that you're safe. So Aimee and I got married when I was 20, and we always joke because she had to order my drink for me when we were on our honeymoon. I couldn't rent a car. I couldn't get a hotel room. Like, here's my wife who was of the legal age to be able to do this, and I wanted a drink. I just wanted to celebrate our honeymoon. And my wife had to order it. Sad world.
That's okay.
But, I want to talk not only about marriage, but I want to talk about personal journey. So your journey of faith, I know that I know that you converted to Catholicism from the Lutheran faith for me.
For us.
For us, for our children.
For us, for our family.
It truly was. Yeah, I guess I wouldn't have seen it that way at that time.
At the time, you probably didn't feel that way.
That's a great way to put it. So anybody that's going through that, my wife comes in with the win on that one. Yes, it's for it's for both of you, though. It's not just for the other person. So it shouldn't be.
Right, because I was thinking down the road. I was thinking I didn't want there to be conflict or division and if I could understand better what you believed versus what I believed at the time, then I wanted to make sure that we were in union with how we were going to raise our kids and how our family was going to be.
And we'll get to it, but for a time, you were the one carrying all the brunt. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But just talk about a little bit about your own faith journey, like where you were then. And you don't have to go in depth, but like where you were then, and here you are almost it is 30 years later since we met. But it's a long time. Where does that faith journey begin? What do you still think about it? And where are you at now after me being in ministry for 15 years and us joining in ministry for the retreat property?
Well, I would say, as I mentioned before, theater was a huge part of my life, and along with that, as an only child, my parents were divorced, and my mom would play on the weekends. Part of her, making a living was playing at different churches, and she would conduct the choirs, and she would play the organ, and sometimes there would be handbells. If anybody knows, you ring the handbells this way.
And your mother is a very incredible, accomplished pianist.
Very much so, yeah. Very incredible musician. And so for me, at that time, when I was young, growing up, I don't know, elementary school through high school, going to church was about playing or singing. What's the anthem we're going to sing at the service, or are we playing handbells, or that kind of thing. It really wasn't. I didn't understand it to be about faith, or really understand why I was
less
going.
about the encounter, more about
what we were
being
doing,
part of the worship.
Yeah, I guess that's true, because I was being part of the worship, and
but you might not
be
seeing it that way. But the way the grace of God works,
I was a
providing.
kid.
Yeah,
I was a kid. I didn't really, see it for any other way, and that's fine, because I was, going to learn later on in life.
Hey, I went to Catholic school for 8 years, and I still didn't understand it, or still didn't get it. So you weren't even that far off by just showing up to play handbells.
And I would say that I think my dad was in the background. I didn't get to see him that often, but I think in the background, he was, I learned later on that he was always praying for me. He had a strong established faith, and he was always praying for me in the background. I didn't know that, but I came to know that later on.
Yeah.
So then faith was not really always in the forefront. It was not always something that I thought about.
Right.
I didn't make it part of my everyday life, I guess, is what I mean. It was.
Yeah, but I think like so many of us that we, at a certain point of our life, are just showing up in the building, whether we're singing, whether we're reading, whether we're just there as participants. Mm-hmm. We're just going because it's the thing to do. And that's what you do on Sunday. You pick your time. You might have your pew, whatever it might be. But you're there. You did the thing, whatever the thing is. You did it. And then you walked away and you're like, yeah, I did my thing.
Well, and I can say, as probably, I don't even know what the percentage is of college students. I can say that I didn't go to church during college. As a young adult, because it wasn't central in my life at that time. So I didn't really see a need to go find a church to go to.
Neither did I. My roommate was like, you don't have to go to church. You can just pray in your room. I was like, really? They never told me that. So I liked that theory when I was in school.
Yeah, right. So
then, here we are. Now you graduate, right?
Graduate,
and we are already engaged to be married. And I guess that started. Would you say that really started your road to personal faith development, or was it still even in that conversion to the Catholic faith?
Well, I think in talking about our family and raising our children, and when we ended up out of school, after school was over, and we would go to church together regularly, you felt that it was important to go for whatever reason that
Catholic
guilt. Your journey.
Catholic guilt. Let's still in the Catholic guilt phase here. That's okay.
All right.
You're supposed to do the thing, right?
Right. And I would go with you and try to understand and learn. I went to RCIA, so I was learning about the Catholic faith and learning, the differences and similarities between the Lutheran faith that I was in and the Catholic faith that you were in. And I said, geez, the creed is the same. We say the same thing. So anyway, I know there are a lot of other differences besides that, but initially,
not a ton.
But initially, I was like, well, we say the same words. Why is this?
Yeah, right.
So anyway, I was learning, what the true differences were, and then decided to get involved because I could offer my gifts. I heard, a lot of talk about time, talent, and treasure, and so I thought, well, I could sing. They have cantors that sing up there or choirs and things like that. So I decided to get involved and be part of the community that we were going to be part of, at least initially.
So we're still we're at my church, right? This is where I grew up, and anymore I attended Mass all the time, but it was my home parish. And it's an old cathedral style Polish church, organ,
up in the balcony,
like the way that I thought church is supposed to be. And just as an aside, when I say the thing, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm telling you honestly where I was in my faith at that time. Like, God's grace is there, right? And I talk about that all the time in my talks and in my writings, that us showing up is the first part, right? Like, us showing up is better than not going at all. And us showing up and not knowing why we're showing up, still, like, we should be showing up even if we don't get it. But at some point, we have to move from a simple believer into a disciple. We have to begin to own the faith. Otherwise, when things happen, it shakes us. And as I'll talk about in a minute, we end up walking away. So you're at this point where now you've converted to Catholicism. For me, you're going to the for us. Thank you. For us, I'll never forget that again. So she converted for us, and here you are, learning, probably more involved in the faith than I am at this point, because you've gone through this process.
Well, I'm trying to get involved. I'm trying to figure out how to be part of the community, or how to contribute, or whatever. And for me, that was singing.
So this is 29 years ago, 30 years ago. At what point do you really feel that your faith became something that it started to affect your soul? Like, I mean, I know that being there was probably doing things like we talked about, God's perfect timing. But like, is there a moment when you're singing and you feel something? Is there a moment when you're praying? Is it 10 years later? Is it 10 days later? When do you feel that your faith really started to become something that you were owning?
Oh, well, I would say that wasn't until probably about 8 years later.
Okay.
Maybe more like 9. Or maybe it was more like 10 years later. And that was when I joined the moms group. When we moved away from your home. Yeah, we changed churches. We moved from your home parish, moved to a new area. And
now, as an aside, at this point, when Aimee's talking, I stopped going to church.
So in that time, we got married. I was singing at church, cantoring, and
kids.
We didn't have kids for about 5 years, so there was that little bit of time there. But we were going to church and participating.
And then we had children, and I was doing well in business. I was bored. I felt like I wasn't getting anything out of Mass. I had the kids.
Because I was singing.
I was an adult now. No one was making me go, right? Like, there was no parent like forcing me to go. I don't know, for some reason or another, I just said, I'm not going anymore. And this lasted 3 to 4 years of me completely not going to church. I know, but you guys can pick yourself up off the floor that Greg stopped going to church for 3 to 4 years, but it's an important part of my story. It's an important part of our story. And sometimes we go through things like this where they're a crisis of faith, or it's a springboard where God throws us into a valley and gets our attention. So back to you, 8 or 9 years, we're into this faith journey. We've switched churches closer to home, closer to where we live, instead of driving all the way back.
Although I did for a number of years.
No, you did, yeah.
And I sometimes, because you weren't going to church, sometimes I was having to take the kids with me.
Right.
I couldn't drop them off anywhere, and so I would have to take them with me.
Yeah,
and
thanks for the reminder, honey.
Try to hold them off to the side while I sang, so that they wouldn't make too much noise in the microphone. But there was that time when we had kids when.
True. And then you said, I want to move churches closer to home, because if our kids are going to grow up in a community and be Catholic, I want them to be part of the community, not somewhere 25 minutes away. And you're not going anyway, so
Right.
I'm taking them here.
Exactly. And part of it was too that I knew that there were through preschool and those experiences, I knew there were other people in school that the kids would get to know that were also going to church. And I really loved that idea that, you could see that, I was starting to think, it was ruminating in there that, it would be good that the kids would go to church and then see these kids at school and at church and, out, the grocery store and whatnot.
Give them the support that they need, right?
That know that everybody was, not everybody, but, a lot of people were also living the same way we were.
Yeah. And you join this moms group that they have at the church.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because you feel this was really a place where you were cemented in your faith. That started a journey that continues past today, but this was the real awakening, let's call it.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. I mean, this group of moms got together once a week and in the mornings, and a creative group of women, a thoughtful group of women, the moms of all ages, and we would, do crafts. We would do, but all obviously related to faith. But the conversations would have to do with kids and with marriage, and struggling to maybe pull a family member, back to church, back into church,
back
with
into
you.
The fray,
or your spouse, not necessarily just a family member, but it could be your spouse that you were frustrated with a situation. I don't know. It's just a really
no wonder all these women hated me. You told them all about what an evil person I was.
I did not. I didn't. No, I didn't. But I listened. I didn't really necessarily contribute always to the conversation. There were some mornings there were 30 women there. So
it was a very strong moms group.
It was, at the time that I joined, it was a very strong moms group and very prayerful. And I had never met other women that like that at that point in my life that were really thoughtful and intentional about things they did with their children, the activities or traditions. We talked, as Christmas came, we talked a lot about traditions. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. How are we tying in the real meaning of Christmas to Santa? Are there ways that we can, and I implemented the famous 3 gifts, one for each wise man, right?
So Santa
brought 3 gifts.
2 things that I will talk about that my wife contributed to that changed my life forever. And continues to this day. Wait, let me say this again. Changed our lives.
Thank you.
Number 1 is that you made me eat dinner at the dinner table. Because when I was growing up, we never ate dinner together. We ate dinner on TV trays, and we were all over the house. People ate at different times. We just did not eat dinner together other than certain holidays. So that was number 1. Aimee said, you need to come eat with me, and I did. And I love it. And then there were times when I was the only one at the dinner table as the kids got older. And I was like, what happened to this rule?
Well, it wasn't a rule so
no,
much.
I know, but they were busy. You know how kids go in and out.
No, I know.
And then the other thing that, some of the traditions of the holidays, I came from a very tight-knit Polish family with many traditions. We always did the same things every year, and there was a way that we did things. But that wasn't necessarily fair to you because you had ways that you did things as well as a child growing up, and we needed to create our things. And at this mom's group, I'm just kidding. It was I'm joking. It was a beautiful mom's group. But at this mom's group, you began to experience things that other people had talked about, and you began to take little pieces of everything. So one of them, which still rings through today, that we asked him, and the big man, he only brings 3 presents for our children, 1 for each of the wise men, and then we give them a gift from ourselves. So ever since our children were little, they've only ever gotten 4 gifts for Christmas, and they're stocking.
And to be fair, that was... I implemented that a little bit later in their childhood because we initially overdid it many times. But through this moms group and these conversations.
What does Natalie say? Natalie always says, like,
that was before you were Catholic.
Yeah, Dad, I liked it before you were Catholic because we got more presents.
Yeah. Well, they didn't remember that. That was just from watching videos of
watching the baby tapes.
Yeah, we call it watching the baby tapes, and they would say, "Look at all those presents. How come we never got that? How come that didn't continue?"
Mom's group.
Yeah, but through this moms group, I would hear other people talk about how they were incorporating faith into their everyday lives, into their families in ways that I'd never heard of before. And not just Christmas, although that was just an obvious, one.
Yeah.
But so many ways, things I learned about prayer, ways to pray, different ways to pray. I learned so much about Christian music. While I loved Aimee Grant growing up, my stepsister Monique got me into Aimee Grant, and I loved Aimee Grant's songs, but I never really listened to Christian music in general until Mom's Group, when we would do programs and prayer, and they would play these songs as background music or part of retreats and things like that, and I loved it, and I was just so moved by it. So there was always a stirring in my heart through that, and so I would say the Moms Group, as you can tell, really.
And there's still friendships that you have today. Mm-hmm. Nathan is now 24, Natalie's 21. 20 years later, there are people that are in your life. Some of our best friends are people that you met in that Moms Group that were really pivotal, in helping you pray. And especially at a time when here I am, like, so I mentioned at the beginning, we got married when I was 20. Like Aimee, and I say this all the time, she's like on her fourth version of me. So like she married 20-year-old immature Greg, who was pretty more mature than most 20-year-olds.
Correct.
But now I look back, I'm like, I didn't know nothing. And and then there's business Greg, right? Things are starting to go well. I'm having to learn how to handle success and not always handling it well, and so I'm away from the church, and I gotta feel that in some way you feel alone and you're lonely in this.
Yeah.
And so like,
well, I didn't want to be that wife who you only saw her at church with the kids.
Yeah.
I wanted you to be part of what the kids were learning. It was originally your faith. It was becoming my faith, but there was so much I didn't know about the Catholic faith, and so much you could bring to the table to help them from growing up Catholic. Maybe not tradition. Yeah. So,
but this community made you strong.
Absolutely.
I go back to Mom's Group, and that's a community, right? You need that. Otherwise, you might give up. Right? I don't know where our marriage is if you don't have community and people backing you up, right?
True.
I would say
lifting you up, supporting you.
Yeah, and that always works both ways. I mean, we get weak or something happens and you're hurt, and or you're just being inspired for the times when the valley comes.
Absolutely.
So the Moms Group was a great community, but you being at church alone, and I almost became cynical to it in a sense that I didn't need it, right? Like I had walked away, nothing had changed in my life. Things weren't bad. Things were actually better. I was, from a worldly perspective,
right.
I was dying on the inside, but worldly, hey man, things were great. Why would I want to go to a place where it's just boring? And but then you kind of, I don't even remember the point that you actually got me to meet with Father Dan. I don't remember I know we had to join. Did I have to go to the meeting?
Yeah,
Is that what ended up?
Yeah. I said you had to go to the meeting to join the parish.
Yeah, I had to
he
go
had
meet
to meet
the priest.
both of us.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
So I went.
That was that. Yeah, we went, and you listened to all he had to say, and then
told him I wasn't going to come here.
Yeah. Then you said,
nice place you got here, but don't expect to see me.
Yeah.
Ha ha.
Yeah. Well, and talk about why you weren't so jazzed about this church as opposed to maybe some other place that we
They had a
would have
freaking
joined.
drum set. I didn't want to go to a place that was like Godspell in the choir. Coming from an organ to a place that had contemporary worship music in a Catholic church, I was like, they didn't even have kneelers. There's no kneelers.
No, they were all chairs.
I do like that now, though. I do like the chairs.
Yeah.
We're still there. We're still at the same parish.
Yeah.
But
the difference was you grew up in a much different environment, church environment, than what I had found close to our house.
But I was just going through the motions, right? Now I say all this, like not paying attention, not going through the motions. But when I look back, oh my gosh, it was a huge, like, I think about my grandmother and I think about her taking us to services. Now, I don't understand them. I don't remember them and I didn't appreciate them. At 50 years old, almost 50, not there yet, but getting there, I am so grateful my grandmother did that. I may not have appreciated it or saw it in my time when I was flailing, but I certainly feel it and felt it. And I probably felt the prayers of the moms group and the things that you lamented and these times when you were struggling. So, like, we don't give up. We keep doing them, even if we think someone's not getting it. I always say it's like the paralytic who's brought to the feet of Jesus by his friends, and it's because of their faith that the man is healed, not because he wants to be. So I'm kind of like the paralytic at this point where you keep bringing me back to the Lord. You're like, hey, you should join men's fellowship. And I'm like, no, that's just a bunch of guys without shirts on sitting in a big circle passing a talking stick. Like that. I literally said those words.
That's exactly what you said.
And then I'll get to that in a minute, but back to you. So,
well, I just kept trying to make invitations to you. I knew I couldn't change you. I wasn't going to be able to force you to go. That would be no fun because then you'd just be irritated the whole time. I wanted you to go because you wanted to go and you wanted to be involved. And so I would just try to make invitations like, why don't you join men's fellowship? You might meet some people that, feel the same way you do.
Finally get me to go. And I take my son, and nobody talks to me. Like, literally, I went to this men's event. There was like 40 guys. They had pizza, and my son and I, like, nobody, like, welcomed us. Nobody
And you didn't know anybody,
us.
so there wasn't really anybody to gravitate to.
Yeah, and I didn't go back for, like, 2 or 3 years. I was so, like, I'm right. Like, that was what I needed to see now I kept going to church, but I didn't go back to men's group because they were jerks. And that was what I felt about it. Well, so and this plays in a lot too, like in ministry for us. Now we're in 15 years of ministry. Why I believe so strongly in quality and hospitality and welcoming is that every moment might be somebody who's me making their first attempt to come back to church, and you don't want to screw that up.
No, you never know what people's story are or what brought them there that day.
Right.
You don't have any idea.
And here's a pivotal point in your faith, because you go from a professional actress in musical theater who can sing like an angel, right? Like, so often you get that compliment. But when you first started singing, you were singing, right? You were performing still a little bit. Like, you would do the song, and it was just another performance. Not in the essence of what you were feeling, because you were feeling something different, but you were still singing it as a performer should to sing a song to the congregation.
Yeah.
But at some point, you begin to pray. You begin to pray the psalm. And people begin to feel it and experience it differently. We'll get back to me in a second, but tell me about that. What it means for you to be able to pray a psalm with a congregation as the cantor in your faith. And how, does that move you? Does that, I know that you don't take it for granted, but can you feel what the people feel? Can you see it on their faces, or...
Not always.
Are you doing it for God and you're not doing it for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing it for the people, although I have to say, like, when you sing for weddings and funerals,
right?
I want it to enhance the experience that, the family is having for whether it's a wedding or a funeral. So I want it to be meaningful, and I want the words to be meaningful and to be comforting if it's a funeral, or joyful if and beautiful if it's a wedding.
Right.
And the same thing in Mass. I mean, obviously there's lots of different emotions depending on the readings and depending on what the psalm is. It could be lamenting, so it could be sad. And, you want to convey that. So that's where my background in musical theater, I think, really helped in that. It's a very fine line between performing and praying.
Well, so you're saying this, and I'm thinking like a performance would be for the congregation, and what it truly is, as the person proclaiming the psalm, it is a prayer from you to God, and the people are just witnessing that. I think that we forget that. Like, yes, you want to include them, and you don't want this private moment to just be on display, but like, if you're lifting it up to God, like if you're lifting that prayer up to God and the psalm, and the people are responding to that prayer.
Well, right. That's where you're including the congregation because they're part of it.
Yeah.
And so the things I've learned in performing in terms of the way you look at people to include them in the experience is important to know, because if you're constantly just looking down at the words, then you don't have any way of connecting to the people.
Right.
So in that way, it's good to have some idea about performing, I guess. I don't know. But it's not that you're singing at people, because it's a prayer, as you said. It's the word of God.
Right.
And so you need to proclaim that in a beautiful way, because if anybody has ever been in a mass or a service or anything where the singer is not so polished, or not having rehearsed maybe, and not very comfortable with the music, it can be distracting. Then you're not really listening to the words.
Right.
You're noticing that, they don't really know this very well, or they're very uncomfortable, or, gosh, are they going to make it to that note, because you're not really sure. And that makes you uncomfortable. And all of a sudden you're out of it. You haven't heard anything that's been prayed.
You kind of checked out. You start reading the bulletin.
Yeah, well, not necessarily that, but just, it's just distracting. And so, it's not that I'm saying that you need to be a professional singer or actress.
There's been people that I know that don't have a great voice, but it's so prayerful when they do it that it doesn't distract you.
No, absolutely, because I'm not sure exactly how to explain praying through a song versus just performing and singing a song. There's a difference between the two, and I'm not sure that I could put it into words.
Well, if you're listening, for those of you listening, I would say it's kind of like this moment, like if you've ever read something that has deeply moved you and you feel something within you, and it doesn't even have to be prayer, but it's just something that moves within you in a different way that is unique to you. And then when you share that with somebody, you do it with passion and you do it with purpose. And the way that you do it sets somebody else on fire because you believe so deeply in the conviction. Mm-hmm. And that's what I witnessed, even for me, because I would say to you, oh, you performed that today. Or I would say, that was a beautiful prayer. Mm-hmm. Like I could tell where you were at. Mm-hmm. And you were dealing with a lot. I mean, kids are growing up. I'm like fledgling and like, I'm at the golf course, I'm golfing, I'm working, I'm going out, I'm doing this. I'm still in the process of growing up in my late 20s, early 30s and doing that. And I know, and I go back to this moment where you felt alone a lot of times. What does somebody do? Like, so now I'm showing up, but you want me to become involved. You want me to be engaged. You want me to be part of other communities to find at least good Christian Catholic men who can influence me, who can mentor me, and not help me grow up, but help me see who God created me to be. And eventually I find that, right? I mean, eventually I see that. But what are the prayers? What are the conversations? So, number one, we would tell people that if you're praying for somebody that you love who's struggling, community is huge, trusted community. What else? I mean, what else made you strong enough to just continue to fight for me, that the devil wouldn't get me, and that, I wouldn't give myself up to worldly things, and that I would truly be a godly man?
Well, it was trust that God had us. I mean, we went through an awful lot in order to come together to get married.
Right.
We went through a pretty rough journey, but we made it through.
In full disclosure, year one, I was moving out. Aimee was moving out. We were not going to make it to year two.
Yeah.
We were done.
Yeah.
And something said to me, God, who I didn't recognize at the time, but he said, you made an adult decision. Act like an adult. Everybody's going to know they're right. And I wasn't doing it to prove anybody wrong, but this was bigger than me, and it was bigger than you. And you were working 3 to midnight. I was working like 5 a.m. to like 6 p.m. We never saw each other. I was 20. Boom. It was we just had a rough spot. But we came back together. So then, you spend years fixing that, and you move into the next trial or things that just don't come together. So you continue to pray.
Well, so
you continue to trust. I
could look back and say, God obviously carried us to this point.
Yeah.
And with the help of the community, in just conversations, listening to other people's troubles and, how they dealt with them and that kind of thing, just conversations and just weekly going to Mass. We had a good homilist in our priest at the time. Yeah. So always making things relate to real world. So I just felt trust is all I can say, is that I trusted that God was in it. I didn't understand how. I didn't understand, I longed for you to be involved in church. I kept just saying, oh, please, can he be involved in church, God?
What
please.
The hell is wrong with this guy?
No, I didn't say that, but I knew that I couldn't just change you. I couldn't just, make you be the person that I wanted you to be. You had to become who you were going to be, whatever God wanted for you.
Yeah, but you're hanging on, I think, because, and hanging on at times, I mean, literally, but I think that what you're saying is that God was illuminating things to you, through these homilies and through the prayers, that was making you strong enough to trust that there's more, right? That, that I have a plan for him, right? You think about now. So if we look at the way God works, I have a plan for him, continue to carry this cross, continue to be strong enough for the both of you. Because there will be a time that he'll be strong enough for you. But yeah, be strong enough for him. I have you. That's actually a chapter in where faith and real life come together with, the book. But God doesn't just have us then, or he will have us. He has us now. And you felt that. And I think that feeling, that unexplainable feeling, was true faith and true grace.
And I think because I was feeling like I felt like I was doing the right thing by bringing the kids here, by getting involved myself, by going to this mom's group. So I just felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing, and I knew I couldn't change you. So all I could do was either pray for you, make invitations to you. Hey, the kids I got involved with Vacation Bible School and was making up the songs and things like that. And the kids were going, and I'm like, you really should go to the dinner where the kids are going to sing their songs. It's really cute, and it's a big group, and I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. And I did.
And didn't you say that was kind of a turning point for you?
I think for me there was a point when I I use the Easter egg story in my talks about understanding responsibility with the kids. And I think it was around the same time that I was embarrassed that my children were looking up to me and I wasn't living up to the person that I needed to be for them. And I think that vacation Bible school, like that whole dinner and watching the song and doing everything else, I do think that it moved me to understand that this was true joy. I think being present for that and allowing myself to not just go, oh, I got to go to this stupid church thing and I'm going to go and then I can get back and watch the football game or whatever was going on. It was summer, so there was no football. But no, I think that there's truth in that, that, you know, God sometimes allows us to see things through other people. And I think I saw it in my kids. And I didn't want to be a disappointment to them. And it was also a reminder of the beauty of family and the beauty of what we had in a church family. And there was going to be a time when I would need that. And so in 2008, when we lost everything, we lost everything we owned except our house, literally living in a country club community and had to ask people for rides places because we didn't have a car. We had 2 kids in school. Aimee worked. I was out of work. I was out of commission. But we didn't have a car. And we had some friends that had a car that they were going to donate because they hit a coyote with it, and they ended up giving it to us. And
it's not in great shape, but you can have it.
No, I called it White Lightning. It was a Mitsubishi Galant that the windshield leaked, and so the entire
and the floor, I think, was rusted
we had a
out.
Vacuum out. Yeah, it was.
But it worked. It got us where
it's going to make the book. I promise you, there will be a whole story.
But
about
it got us where we needed to go, and that was all that mattered.
And we were so grateful. We went from driving an Infiniti to a 13-year-old Mitsubishi Galant, and we loved and appreciated the Galant way more than this fancy upper-class car that we had before that. And yeah, it wasn't always roses, but but all this is going on, but God had prepared us like for this moment, right? So I had my time that I had finally come back to church. I was getting involved. Your prayers began to stir something in me. God had my attention. So not only did we lose our home, or not only did we lose everything we owned except our house, but we lost all of our friends in that country club community and the people at work that took fancy vacations and went to expensive restaurants. Like, they all left.
Well,
Like,
yeah, they
all
just stopped.
scattered.
They just stopped inviting us to do things because we couldn't afford it, and they knew we couldn't.
And then we couldn't
go
be
with
friends,
them.
right? Like, they couldn't go where we could go or just come visit us. They just stopped. And then I realized one day I was cutting the grass, and I realized that these new friends that I had found at church, that these were people that if something happened to me, that these are the people that would step up and take care of my family. That I didn't need to question any of their motives. I didn't need to think about it differently. These people became family. And so I went from a guy who just saw church as some dumb obligation, the thing, and then I stopped going altogether. And now I get to a point where I'm like, I can't live without these people, and I want to be more into this. I have to tell people my story. And it's at this point, through community, through trust, through your prayer, that then I'm called into ministry, right? To start to tell this testimony of how God had saved us from ourselves, myself at least. And I had to smash rock bottom. You ever see Looney Tunes and Wile E. Coyote jumps off the cliff and he smashes into the ground, and then the Roadrunner is like beep beep, and then he goes on the way? Like, that's literally what happened to me.
Yeah.
And
You were in bed for like a week.
yeah, like EKG, like I think I'm dying, depression, should I check out? Like, it was bad. And then God's like, meep, meep. And so he moves on. And then here I am, and I'm like, started telling this story. And then Libby, my event coordinator, asked me to do some confirmation preparation.
She was a youth minister at the time.
Yeah, she was a youth minister, asked me to be involved in that. But then so now you start to see this change in me. All good?
Yeah, it was great at first. I mean, it was like, woo, finally he's starting to, get involved. He's passionate. He's, feeling the importance of us being together as a family at church. And, we used to joke because by this time the kids were old enough to be servers. So at Mass, it would be like the Wasinski show. We would say, the kids were serving, Greg was reading, I was singing, it was like a whole thing.
We were perfect, man. We never had a care in the world.
Yeah, well, no, it wasn't perfect. I mean, we were still driving that. We were still trying to find a car and stuff. But we were happy. It was a good time. I'm not saying it was perfect, but it was really good.
No, I can remember being out of work and making dinner and praising God, just like worship songs and all that stuff's going on. And I think those were some of the happier times.
Well, and we were going to like missions. That's where we saw some Christian musicians that came to the church. And I think we were both really inspired by that. So we for that time, we were really growing together, I felt like.
Yeah, but there comes a time where the ministry starts to take on its own life. And then you start to feel left behind a little bit.
Yes. That's true.
So it's like you pulled me so hard. you slingshotted me into the Jesus stratosphere. And we would try to pray together. And you'd be like, oh, you know so much more than I do. Like, I feel so dumb. And it's suddenly like the devil gets in there and starts making it like this little competition. And so we struggled to pray together.
Yeah, we tried. We tried just listening to music, which was about the best we could do without feeling this competition. Yeah, exactly. We tried reading it together and taking turns and, then trying to talk about it. But I didn't, always understand in the way that you did, so.
So as a praying wife, as a spouse who, has now helped the reversion process, who has a husband who's in ministry now. And it's crazy. Like, this is just an aside, but like when you think about a spouse for somebody who's in ministry, like the divorce rate of Protestant pastors and those in ministry is crazy. I mean, it really is, like, because people always look at the minister or the speaker and think, oh my gosh, I love him so much. Must be amazing to be married to this guy. And all you can think about is, oh yeah, let me tell you all the other stuff, so but you have to fight for that. And that takes some time. It took us a while, years, until we really had a breakthrough of we're in this together.
Yeah. And I ended up working in the office of our church because I felt like I needed, I had a ministry of my own, if you will,
right?
Because I liked being with people and I liked being at the church and I liked the way it made me feel. And so I ended up getting involved in working at the church. And that kind of grew into different responsibilities and that kind of thing. And, but I had something of my own while you had the ministry, which was not really mine at all. And you always try to include me. I mean, you didn't like just leave me out and go, I'm doing my own thing.
Yeah, but it was hard because a lot of it was on the road. You were at home with the kids.
Right.
There were a lot of experiences. You don't want to come home and necessarily talk about them because you're not part of it. And I think, though, like as you talk about that, I think it's important for people to know that even though you do have maybe a faith that you're sharing together, you still need to have that individual faith in your personal relationship with Christ and your personal relationship with the community or ministry within the community that helps feed you and guide you. And whether that's a men's group or it's a music ministry or it's a mom's group or maybe it's the sewing group or whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But like, I think it's good that you have your own individual thing that you do that is for you that you like. You both don't need to like the same thing.
Right. I mean, you can't always be doing everything together. You do need to have some things we're all different. You
Right.
don't have the same interests necessarily that I do, or things don't speak to you the same way that they speak to me. So that's okay. We should have those things that are separate.
And I think for a lot of people, it's like a competition. Like they're comparing themselves to other people that are in church, other people that are, doing something that they think are holier than them, or that these people do have it together. And so they don't try as hard, or they don't push. And so now I have a huge heart for people that I see sitting by themselves in church, because that drives me to say, like, I want to grab the other spouse. And it's not always men. Like I used to say, guys, you need to get there with your wives, because that was a huge thing. But there's a lot of guys that I see alone now, at our church and things like that. And so I think that we need to support one another in it, but we still need to have that individual faith. And so now that we have this journey, like, where is the faith life now for you? What are you working on? How are you trying to grow personally? Like, what do you think about in our relationship when it comes to prayer and our faith and where we are now?
I think it's harder to see it when we're in the middle of it.
Yeah,
because
no,
I can
it
look
is.
back and sort of see, okay, I see where that was going and that kind of thing. I mean, for me right now, I've been really trying to focus on the Bible, and really, I did the Bible in a year, listening to all listening to the Bible read
Right.
throughout the entire year, last year, and
And
really,
I'm very proud of you for that, because that's outside your comfort zone.
it is, and while I didn't necessarily understand everything, I loved being able to make connections and connect the dots with things I heard, readings in church or stories I had heard, and I'm like, oh, that's where that comes from, or whatever. So that was really eye-opening for me, and so just trying to understand better this faith that we profess, that I love to sing about, and
you asked me questions that opened up conversation and things that we didn't know, we looked up, or, just really began to engage. Like, you're growing, right? So you've reached this plateau of comfort and giving, and I feel like you're feeding yourself for once, in which you didn't do for a long time. You worried and felt that need to take care of me, maybe so much that now it's time for you to have another awakening. Like,
well, I didn't
there's
think it was
multiple ones.
important. I mean, I had tried to read the Bible before, and, to try to read it by yourself, I feel like is a pretty daunting task. I mean, to just say, I'm going to read the Bible, it's not quite that easy. And,
Yeah, right.
I had done a few Bible studies, but it felt very piecemeal. It was like, this is in the middle of the Bible, and I'm like, I don't understand how this relates to all this stuff. So I never really thought it was that important. Like, why do I need to know that? But when you're hearing the readings, and you start to hear, obviously, readings get repeated in cycles and that kind of stuff. I don't know. I just felt like it was important that I try to better understand the Bible, which is the Word.
Connect the dots.
Yeah, to connect the dots. So I just didn't think it was important before. Now, for some reason, I feel like in the last couple of years, it is important to do your best to understand what you can.
Yeah.
We're not everybody is a scholar.
Yeah.
But that is always our call, is to try to connect in new ways to the Word.
Right.
Otherwise you just keep hearing the same stories over and over again. And it's like, yeah, I heard that one already, but you might hear it in a different way, and you're in a different season of life. And if you understand what happens before and after, like you're always saying about readings, when you understand what happens before and after, or the context for which something is happening.
Right.
I'm
Doing
like,
your preparation.
Oh, I see. That really doesn't mean, I'm trying to think of a good example too of things that we hear.
Well, there's so much like you hear about in the New Testament that when you go back and you see the relation to where it came in the Old Testament, or
And historically.
right, and you hear a reading in church, and you only hear verses 13 to 21, and when you go back and you read 1 through 12 and 22 through 28, the whole thing comes into focus, and so that helps you grow in your faith by taking the time and now having your own individual journey in a sense, but yet trying to include the other person in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
With just a beautiful note or a scripture verse that said, it reminded me of you today, or I heard this. And we kind of share things back through text, or, that we hear, and, oh, this inspired me, or I read this, you should read it. And sometimes you'll say to me, I don't get it. What am I supposed to get? I'm like, never mind. It inspired me, and maybe you're in a different place today, and that's okay.
Well, and we have just started doing that in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a newer
you
thing.
need to listen to that. And
so what would you say as we begin to wrap things up? Like, what would you just say? What is your advice for people who maybe have a spouse who they're praying for, or they haven't prayed for, but they've been struggling with? Maybe somebody that they really, so many people have loved ones and children that have left the church, or just haven't chosen the faith yet. What is your advice to them based on your experience? And then, if there's anything else that you want to share that we haven't talked about yet.
Well, I would say be patient.
Yeah.
That
Kairos is God's time.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard to be patient, but to be patient, stay faithful in that you are praying for them consistently, whether it's your children or your spouse. Be the example that you would want for them to see. If you're going to church, you can always make that invitation. Hey, I'm going at whatever time, 10 o'clock, mass or service or whatever it is, and say, I'm going, anybody want to come with me? If not, that's okay. But you've made the invitation. Or don't lose hope in saying, well, I'm just not going to ask anymore.
Right.
Because you never know, as you said, that you're not going to one day hear it in a way that says, oh, and maybe try to find different ways to invite, not the same way every time. But, And
on the other side, I would tell you, be honest. Like, if your heart is hurting because you're there by yourself and your loved one is not there, they may not know that. Like, tell them, like, I'm really struggling because you're not there with me. And have the conversation, and don't expect them because of guilt that they're going to go there, to go with you, but at least be honest with them, and you've said what you needed to say, and then you let God begin to do the work.
Right. And that's the planting seeds that I was talking about in terms of making those invitations. Be consistent, be prayerful. You don't keep pushing it. Don't make the sarcastic comments. That's not going to make them feel any more reason to want to come. Like you said, the guilt, that kind of thing. Just honestly, I'd love for you to join me today, and then let's go out to lunch, or, whatever it is. And I feel like just if you continue to be who you are, who God called you to be, then he will do the rest if you're faithful to just being who God called you to be. So if that's going to mass every week and being involved, your family will see that. Your kids will see that. Your spouse will see that. And if you continue to invite them in, or share with them something that you heard in the homily today, or at, in a meeting that you heard that you're like, oh, this is really cool, I wanted to tell you about it, then I think that all you can do is plant seeds. You can't force them into changing, but you can be the example that they need of what a faithful person is.
Yeah, I would say, and I always tell this to coaches too, like, you have you can't control whether or not they'll play a game, or whether your spouse or your loved one will go to church. But if you act negatively, I can guarantee you that you can make it so that they never go.
They never want, they never will want
Like,
to.
I don't want to be around that person. If this is what this Lord produces, if this is the kind of person that God produces as a Catholic or as a Christian of any faith, I don't want to be that person. You're a friggin' hypocrite. Mm-hmm. And we're all hypocrites, right? We all sin, but
none
like
of us
when
are
you're
perfect.
like, oh, when you act a contrary way to what you want somebody to experience, you're certainly going to push them away if you do it in a way that just makes them feel
Bad about themselves,
icky.
bad about, yeah, for sure.
All right. Last,
Come on, bring it on. What else you got for me?
Okay, so here I'm going to give you one. Well, I'm going to give you one thing because this goes hand in hand. Couples have been changed by their time at Trilogy. Give a plug for the retreat property. No, it's true because we've seen a lot of couples powerfully, through the grace of God, have incredible encounters. Like, that has nothing to do with us. That is all God.
Absolutely.
We just create the opportunity. But just a little bit about the retreat property if people want to come and get away with their spouse and grow in faith.
Well, Trilogy is a 24, if you haven't heard about it in anything else you've watched from us. Trilogy is a beautiful 24-acre property that gives you and your spouse, if you're talking specifically about couples, but it could be for people individually as well to grow in their faith. But it gives couples the space to connect on a different level. You need to be out of your environment. A lot of people will say retreats. Oh, I don't do that. That's kind of, a little too touchy-feely, good for me. But the Trilogy retreat property is a little bit different in that we are very much a home feeling. I mean,
the retreat is to retreat from the world to get away, not like, but like retreat to just get away.
To get away from your everyday environment, to get away from your everyday life and put away the phone, put away the computer and just spend time together. And I liken it to when you first were in a relationship together and all you wanted to do was just be alone together. Right. You didn't want to have friends around. You just wanted to be together. And, maybe thinking about a retreat together as that time when you first fell in love, when you first, were together and had a deeper connection, right? We lose that connection as we've been together for longer and longer if we don't work at staying connected with one another.
Well, and if one of you wants to lay by the pool or use the hot tub while the other one fishes or goes for a walk or reads a book by the fire, like there's so many different opportunities for you to connect together, but then also spend time separate if there's certain things that you want to work on individually and then come together over dinner or, breakfast and then hold hands and do your walk or whatever. But we've certainly experienced couples in every different phase of their relationship from DEFCON 5 to, oh my God, we love each other so much. We just want to be together. So it doesn't matter where you are, but it's about giving glory to God by spending time together. And that's honoring the sacrament of marriage just by taking that time. So how can they find out about Trilogy, honey?
Well, you can go to trilogy.center on the web and view our rooms, view the outdoor experiences that you can have or inside as well. We also have a Facebook page, so you can find us on social media and see things that are going on. We post all kinds of pictures, videos, little mini retreats, food, I don't know, all kinds of things, inspiring quotes. We're always posting things. We have a couple dogs here that have been very healing to people. I was going to say healing to people, but yes, therapeutic's a better word. Chickens. We have fresh food, fresh eggs right now, and a garden to be soon cultivated that we can have. Yeah, that we can have that. So you can find us on the web. You can find us on social media. You can call us at 1-833-LET-ME-BE.
I like that.
What else?
That's all I got for now. Okay. Thanks for doing this.
Absolute. Thanks for finally asking me. It only took how long?
Well, I don't want to talk about how long, but
that's okay. We were our story has been percolating, and
Yes.
we have more to come.
More to come.
So
to come.
in
Not
another
perfection,
no,
but a journey.
for sure.
I love you.
Love you too, honey.
All right. Well, before this gets too sappy, I just want to thank you for joining us on this edition of the Faith in Real Life podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'm going to ask you to share it. Share it with anybody that you think might benefit from the content, or anybody that you think should hear this message just about relationships and marriage and just a conversation between husband and wife. And maybe it'll inspire their relationship or your relationship to grow stronger. And that's a way that the message of our ministry continues to grow. The Faith in Real Life community is always available at faithandreallife.com. And that's where you can find all of our podcasts, all of our resources, and different ways that we're connecting with you, as well as our online learning center, which you can take classes and you can learn more about Bible studies and those other resources that we have. So thank you for joining me today. Thank you for being part of our family in every sense of the word. And if you want to take a retreat, you can go to trilogy.center and learn more about that and do your reservation as well. I know it's going to be a great season. All of our podcasts this season are going to be with guests when it comes to the Faith in Real Life podcast. And then we also have our Coffee and Conversation podcasts, which run on all social media platforms. And that's on Thursday and Tuesday mornings. Tuesday and Thursday, whichever way your week starts, at 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's an interactive podcast. So if you'd like to listen to those, you can, and you can chime in. But if you're not available at that time, you can always watch the replay later in the day. So I pray that God will meet you everywhere that you desire Him always. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. And I know that more amazing things are ahead. God bless you, and God keep you.